I'm sitting in the back of a police station at 2 a.m., and everyone around me is losing their minds. Detective Martinez keeps pacing between the coffee machine and my chair, her radio crackling with updates about crime scenes and missing persons. Officer Kim won't stop staring at me like I might explode at any second. The FBI agent who flew in from Los Angeles keeps checking his phone and muttering about jurisdictions. But I'm not panicking. I should be terrified, right? 3 people are dead. A restaurant empire is crumbling, and they're all asking me the same question over and over. What did you see that night? The truth is, I saw everything, but I can't tell them that. Detective Martinez slides a fresh cup of coffee across the metal table. Maya, we know you were more than just his waitress. The money transfers, the apartment lease in your name, the trips to Seoul. This wasn't some casual business relationship. I take a sip of the coffee. It's terrible, but I drink it anyway because my hands need something to do. I served him coffee every Tuesday and Thursday for 8 months. Black, no sugar. 20% tip, always exact change. And the $1 million restaurant he bought you? That's when I feel it. The familiar weight of guilt settling on my chest like a stone. Because she's right. It wasn't casual. Nothing about Vincent Kim was ever casual. He left a tip, I say quietly. Just not the kind you're thinking of. Officer Kim leans forward. His English is careful, measured. Miss Rodriguez, 3 members of the Park family are dead. Vincent Kim has disappeared. His entire organization is at war, and you're sitting here like you're waiting for a bus. I meet his eyes. What would you like me to do? Cry, scream, fall apart? My voice stays steady even though my heart is hammering. I've already done all of that. The FBI agent closes his phone and sits down across from me. Maya, Vincent Kim isn't just some businessman who owned a few restaurants. He's been under federal investigation for 2 years. Money laundering, protection rackets, connections to Seoul cartels, and somehow a waitress from East LA became his most trusted associate. Most trusted associate, if only they knew how wrong they were. Detective Martinez tries a different approach. Help us understand the timeline. When did you realize who he really was? I close my eyes and see Vincent's face the night everything changed. The way he looked at me when I told him I couldn't do it anymore. The way his voice broke when he said my name for the last time. The night I decided to save myself instead of him. The room goes quiet. Even the radio stops crackling. Have you ever had to choose between saving someone you love and saving yourself? When staying loyal means losing everything, but walking away means becoming the kind of person you swore you'd never be. If you know that kind of pain, hit subscribe. Because some stories aren't about the choice you make. They're about learning to live with it afterward. 8 months ago, I thought my biggest problem was rent money. I was working 3 jobs. Morning shifts at Milano's Cafe, afternoon cleaning at an office building downtown, and weekend catering gigs that paid cash under the table. My studio apartment in Koreatown cost more than I made most months, but it was close to everything and I'd learned enough Korean from my neighbors to get by. That's when Vincent Kim started coming to Milano's. Table 7 every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 7:30 a.m. He'd order black coffee, read the same financial newspaper, and leave a 20% tip in exact change. Never spoke to anyone, never caused problems, never even looked up when other customers got loud or demanding. But I noticed things about him that the other girls didn't. The way people gave him space without realizing it. How conversations got quieter when he walked in. The expensive watch, the perfectly tailored suits, the phone calls he took in rapid Korean that sounded like orders being given. Most importantly, I noticed how safe I felt when he was there. It was subtle at first. The creepy regular who always tried to touch my hand when I gave him change. He stopped coming after Vincent started his Tuesday routine. The group of college kids who'd get drunk and harass the staff? They moved their weekly meetup to another cafe. Even my manager, Mrs. Chen, seemed calmer on the days Vincent came in. I told myself it was coincidence. But deep down, I knew better. The first time Vincent spoke directly to me was 3 weeks into his routine. I was refilling his coffee when my ex-boyfriend Marcus walked in. Marcus had been texting me nonstop, showing up at my other jobs, making my life miserable because I wouldn't take him back. That morning, he cornered me by the counter. "Maya, we need to talk. You can't keep ignoring me." I was trying to get past him without causing a scene when I felt someone behind me. Vincent had stood up from his table and suddenly Marcus was backing away with this look on his face I'd never seen him before. Pure fear. "Everything okay here?" Vincent asked. His English was perfect, barely accented, but there was something in his voice that made my stomach flip. Marcus mumbled something about wrong person and practically ran out of the cafe. Vincent looked at me for a long moment. "Some men don't understand the meaning of no." "Thank you," I managed. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He returned to his table like nothing had happened, but I caught him watching the door where Marcus had disappeared. That's when I started paying real attention. The expensive clothes weren't just fashion. They were armor. The quiet phone calls weren't business meetings. They were commands. The way other customers avoided him was an accident. It was survival instinct. Vincent Kim wasn't just another businessman having morning coffee. He was dangerous. And somehow, without even trying, I'd caught his attention. 3 days later, Marcus showed up at my apartment building. But this time, he didn't come alone. He brought 2 friends and they weren't there to talk. That's the night I learned what Vincent's protection really meant, and why I should have run instead of feeling grateful. The night Marcus brought his friends to my apartment, I learned the difference between feeling safe and actually being safe. I was coming home from my cleaning job around 11 p.m. when I saw them in the parking lot. Marcus and 2 guys I didn't recognize, standing by the stairs to my building. One of them had his hands in his jacket pockets, and something about their posture made my blood run cold. "Maya," Marcus called out when he saw me. "We need to settle this thing between us." I stopped walking. My keys were in my hand, but my apartment was up 2 flights of stairs, and they were blocking the only way to get there. "There's nothing to settle, Marcus. We broke up 6 months ago." "See, that's where you're wrong." He started walking toward me, his friends flanking him. "You embarrassed me in front of people. Made me look weak. That's not something I can just forget." The bigger guy pulled his hands out of his pockets and I saw the brass knuckles. This wasn't about getting me back. This was about making me pay for saying no. I was calculating whether I could run to my car when I heard a voice behind me. "Gentlemen?" Vincent stepped out of the shadows near the building entrance. He wasn't wearing his usual business suit, just dark jeans and a black sweater. But somehow that made him look more dangerous, not less. Marcus froze. "This isn't your business, man." "Maya Rodriguez is under my protection." Vincent's voice was calm, conversational, which makes this very much my business. The guy with the brass knuckles took a step forward. 3 against 1, old man. You sure you want to do this?" Vincent smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. He said something in Korean, sharp and fast, and suddenly 2 more men appeared from cars I hadn't even noticed were there. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't make threats. They just stood there, and somehow that was more terrifying than any gun. Marcus looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over, Maya." "Yes, it is," Vincent said quietly. "And if you're smart, you'll remember that." After they left, Vincent walked me to my apartment. We didn't talk until we reached my door. "How long have you been watching me?" I asked. Long enough to know you needed protection before you realized it yourself. I should have been angry about the invasion of privacy. Should have demanded to know how he knew where I lived, how long he'd been following me, what gave him the right to interfere in my life. Instead, I felt something that scared me more than Marcus and his friends. Relief. For the first time in months, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't afraid to come home in the dark. I had someone powerful enough to make the scary things go away. That's when I realized I was already trapped. Vincent didn't ask for anything in return that night, which should have been my first warning. He walked me to my door, waited until I locked it behind me, and left without a word about payment or favors or what I owed him now. But I knew better than to think his protection came free. The bill arrived 3 days later. Not money. Vincent never asked for money. The bill came in the form of a conversation that changed everything I thought I knew about my life. He was waiting at table 7 when I arrived for my Tuesday morning shift, but this time he wasn't alone. A Korean woman sat across from him, elegant in that effortless way that screamed expensive education and old money. She looked at me like I was something unpleasant stuck to her shoe. "Maya," Vincent said when I approached with his usual coffee. "This is Miss Park. She has some information you need to hear." Miss Park opened a folder and spread photographs across the table. Pictures of me at Milano's, at my cleaning job, walking to my car, pictures I didn't know anyone was taking. "Your ex-boyfriend Marcus was hired to harass you," she said in crisp English. "Someone wanted you frightened, isolated, vulnerable." My hands started shaking. "Hired by who?" She showed me another photo. A bank deposit slip with Marcus's name on it, $5,000, deposited the day before he started showing up at my jobs. "The same people who've been watching you for 6 months, the same people who know about your grandmother's medical debt, your student loans, the fact that you're 3 months behind on rent despite working 80 hours a week." Vincent's eyes never left my face. "Maya, you weren't randomly chosen to work Korean events. You weren't accidentally hired by catering companies that serve our community. Someone has been positioning you in our world for months." The room started spinning. Everything I thought was coincidence. The job at Milano's, the catering work, even Marcus's sudden interest in getting back together. It was all planned. "Why?" I whispered. Miss Park closed the folder. "Because someone wanted Vincent Kim to notice you, to feel protective of you, to care about what happened to you." Vincent leaned forward. "The question is why? What do they gain by making me care about a waitress from East LA? I looked at him, really looked, and saw something that made my stomach clench. He wasn't just protective anymore. He was invested, emotionally involved in a way that made him vulnerable. "I'm bait," I said. "Yes," Miss Park replied. "Very expensive, very carefully planned bait. And now we need to figure out who's setting the trap and what they're really after." Vincent reached across the table and took my hand. "Maya, I'm going to keep you safe, but I need you to understand something. The people who did this, they're not amateurs. They're not going to stop just because their first plan failed. What do you want me to do? Help me find them." His grip tightened. "Before they decide you've served your purpose." That's when I realized the truth. I wasn't just trapped in Vincent's world anymore. I was trapped in a game I didn't understand, with rules I'd never learned, and people who saw me as nothing more than a piece to be moved around the board. The only question left was whether I was going to be a pawn or a player. Learning you've been someone's pawn for 6 months changes everything about how you see yourself. I spent that night staring at the ceiling of my studio apartment, thinking about every coincidence that wasn't really a coincidence. The catering company that kept calling me for Korean events. The manager at Milano's who specifically requested me for Vincent's section. Even the apartment I was renting. in the heart of Koreatown, perfectly positioned for someone to watch my daily routine. Someone had been playing chess with my life, and I'd been too busy surviving to notice. The next morning, I made a decision that probably saved my life and definitely changed it forever. I called Vincent. "I want in," I said when he answered. "Not as bait, not as someone you protect, as someone who helps you figure this out." There was a long pause. "Maya, you don't understand what you're asking for. I understand that someone turned my entire existence into a setup. I understand that Marcus almost put me in the hospital because someone paid him to scare me. And I understand that whoever did this isn't going to stop just because their plan didn't work perfectly. This isn't a movie. People die in my world. People die in my world too. They just do it slower, from debt and stress and working themselves to death for rent money." I took a breath. "The difference is, in your world, I might actually have some power to fight back." Vincent was quiet for so long I thought that he'd hung up. "There's something I haven't told you," he finally said, "about why someone might target you specifically." "What do you mean?" "Meet me at Milano's in an hour. And Maya? Don't tell anyone we're meeting. Not Mrs. Chen, not the other girls. No one." He hung up before I could ask why. When I got to Milano's, Vincent was already there, but not at his usual table. He sat in the back corner where conversations couldn't be overheard, with his back to the wall and eyes on every entrance. "You're scared," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Concerned. There's a difference." He pushed a manila envelope across the table. "Look at these, then tell me if you still want to be involved." Inside were more photographs, but these weren't surveillance shots of me. These were family photos. A woman who looked exactly like me, maybe 10 years older, standing next to a Korean man I didn't recognize. "Who is this?" "Your sister," Vincent said quietly. "Half-sister, to be exact. Same father, different mothers. Her name was Sarah Martinez." Was. Past tense. "She's dead," I said. It wasn't a question. 3 years ago, car accident in Seoul, except the brakes had been cut. Vincent's voice was careful. "She was married to a man named David Park, high-ranking member of a rival organization, the Park family. The same name as the woman who'd shown me the photographs yesterday. Sarah was pregnant when she died. David Park blamed my family for her death, even though we had nothing to do with it." Vincent met my eyes. "Maya, I think someone's been planning revenge for 3 years, and they chose you because you look exactly like the woman whose death started this war." My hands were shaking again. "You think they want David Park to see me with you, to think you're flaunting a replacement for his dead wife?" "I think they want him angry enough to make mistakes, to come after me in ways that expose his own organization." Vincent reached across the table. "The question is, are you still willing to help? Because once David Park sees you with me, there's no going back to being invisible." I looked at the photograph of my sister, the sister I'd never known existed, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not fear, something harder than that. "Tell me what we need to do." Vincent's plan was simple in theory and terrifying in practice. We were going to make me visible. "David Park operates out of a restaurant called Golden Palace," Vincent explained as we drove through the Koreatown. "Every Friday night he holds court there. Business meetings, family dinners, settling disputes. It's his kingdom." "And you want me to walk in there?" "I want you to walk in there with me, as my date, in front of everyone who knew Sarah, everyone who remembers what she looked like." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "The resemblance is strong enough that David will see her ghost sitting at my table." I stared out the window at the Korean signs and shop fronts that had become familiar over the past 8 months. "What happens when he sees me?" He'll either try to kill me on the spot, or he'll follow us when we leave. Either way, we'll know who we're dealing with and what they're planning. And if he tries to kill you on the spot? Vincent glanced at me. Then you'll learn why people are afraid of me. We spent 3 hours shopping for the right dress. Not just any dress. It had to be perfect. Traditional enough to show respect in a Korean establishment, expensive enough to signal that I belonged with Vincent, and memorable enough that everyone in that restaurant would be talking about me for weeks. The dress we finally chose cost more than I made in 2 months. Deep red silk that made my skin glow, cut in a way that was elegant but not revealing. Vincent added a necklace that probably cost more than my car, and suddenly I looked like someone who belonged in his world. "Remember," he said as we got ready to leave my apartment, "you're not Maya the waitress tonight. You're Maya Rodriguez, my woman, someone important enough that I'm showing her off to my enemies." "What if I mess this up?" "You won't." He cupped my face in his hands. "Maya, you've been surviving in a world that didn't want you for years. You've been invisible when you needed to be and strong when you hadn't to be. Tonight, you just need to be unforgettable." The drive to Golden Palace was the longest 15 minutes of my life. Vincent explained the cultural nuances I needed to know, the people I should avoid eye contact with, the proper way to bow if introduced to elders. But mostly, he prepared me for what it would feel like to be stared at. David Park will recognize you immediately. So will his mother, his siblings, anyone who knew Sarah well. Vincent's voice was steady, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "They're going to think they're seeing a ghost." "How do you know I look that much like her?" Vincent pulled out his phone and showed me another photo. Sarah Martinez Park at what looked like a wedding celebration, laughing at something off camera. The resemblance was stunning. We had the same eyes, the same smile, even the same way of holding our heads when we laughed. "Jesus," I whispered. "David Park loved his wife more than life itself. When he sees you tonight, it's going to destroy him." Vincent put the phone away. "Maya, I need you to understand something. What we're doing tonight, it's cruel. We're using your resemblance to a dead woman to manipulate a grieving widower. Are you having second thoughts?" "No. But I need to know you can live with this. Because once we walk through those doors, we're not just gathering information anymore. We're declaring war." I thought about my sister, the half-sister I'd never known existed, who died because she fell in love with the wrong man. I thought about Marcus and his friends in that parking lot, paid to terrorize me by people who saw me as nothing more than a tool. "Let's go declare war," I said. Vincent smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, it looked genuinely proud. That's my girl. Walking into Golden Palace felt like stepping into a trap we'd set for ourselves. The restaurant was everything Vincent had described. Elegant, expensive, filled with the kind of quiet power that money and fear create together. Korean families sat at round tables covered in white tablecloths, speaking in low voices over traditional dishes that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. And every single person in that room turned to stare at me, not because I was black in a predominantly Korean space. I'd grown used to that over the years. They were staring because I looked exactly like a dead woman, and half of them had known her personally. Vincent kept his hand on the small of my back as we walked to our table, but I could feel the tension radiating through his fingertips. He was scanning the room, cataloging threats, calculating exit routes. "There," he whispered in my ear. "Corner table by the window. That's David Park." I didn't look immediately. Vincent had taught me that much. Never let them know you're watching them watch you. But when I finally glanced over, my breath caught. David Park was staring at me like he'd seen his wife's ghost, which I suppose he had. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of carved features that would have been handsome if they weren't twisted with grief and shock. the woman sitting next to him. His mother, I guessed from her traditional hanbok and the way others deferred to her, had gone completely pale. She said something sharp in Korean that made the entire table go silent. "What did she say?" I asked Vincent quietly. "She asked if I brought Sarah back from the dead to mock them." The hostess seated us at a table with perfect sightlines to David Park's corner. Vincent had planned this carefully. Close enough for them to see every detail of my face, far enough away that they couldn't hear our conversation. "How long do we wait?" I asked, unfolding my napkin with hands that barely trembled. "We don't wait. We eat dinner like a normal couple while they lose their minds trying to figure out if you're real." And that's exactly what we did. Vincent ordered in Korean, choosing dishes he knew I'd like while maintaining casual conversation in English. To anyone watching, we looked like two people falling in love, sharing intimate jokes over expensive wine. But I could feel David Park's eyes on me like a physical weight. Every time I laughed at something Vincent said, every time I touched his hand across the table, I saw Park's face get darker. "He's getting ready to move," Vincent said without looking in Park's direction. His security team just shifted positions. "What do we do?" "We finish our wine and leave through the front door like we own the place." Vincent's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And then we see how badly he wants to follow us." 20 minutes later, we walked out of Golden Palace and into the Los Angeles night. Vincent's car was parked 2 blocks away, giving David Park plenty of time to make his choice. He chose violence. The attack came as we reached the alley beside Vincent's building. 3 men with guns, moving fast and angry, shouting in Korean about justice and dead wives. Vincent moved like water, smooth and deadly, putting himself between me and the bullets. But there were too many of them, and I realized with crystal clarity that we were about to die in this alley because I looked like someone else's ghost. That's when I understood the real cost of playing in Vincent's world. Not the moral complexity or the cultural divides or even the constant danger. The cost was watching someone you care about bleed in an alley because you chose to be more than invisible. But David Park made one mistake. He kept me alive because he needed to look at Sarah's face while he killed the man he blamed for taking her away. And that gave Vincent exactly the opening he needed to remind everyone why people feared him. The next morning, I woke up in Vincent's bed, in his world, with blood under my fingernails that wasn't mine. The police found 3 bodies in that alley, and somehow Vincent and I were having coffee 2 miles away when they died. That's how I learned the difference between being protected and being complicit, between being saved and being trapped, between falling in love with a man and becoming part of his darkness. I'm still here, 8 months later, sitting in this police station, watching detectives try to figure out who I really am. Because the truth is, I'm not sure I know anymore. But I know this. Sometimes the most dangerous game isn't the one someone plays with you. It's the one you choose to play yourself. Have you ever made a choice that saved you but cost you everything you thought you were? When survival meant becoming someone you swore you'd never be? If you've ever stood at that crossroads between who you were and who you had to become, hit subscribe. Because some transformations can't be undone. And sometimes that's exactly what sets you free. What would you have done in Maya's place? Let me know in the comments below.